Star Sailor is the record that I think a lot of people, think of these days, when they think of, Tim Buckley, and it's easy to understand why. I mean, there is a kind of confidence in it, a kind of a kind of sonic ambition to it, a kind of a willingness to really take risks and just push boundaries that the album represents.
There's no question that Star Sailor is just one of the most challenging quote-unquote pop records you'll ever hear. The time signatures in the song are constantly shifting. Tim's voice is vaulting all over the place. You'll hear little bits of kind of rock guitar riffs here and there, but this is not music that's concerned with sticking to any kind of traditional boundaries. The title song in particular is this really haunting, multi-tracked vocal piece. They spent a whole day just overdubbing layers and layers of Tim's voice into this kind of ghostly, kind of like spirit in purgatory kind of quality.
It sounds like self-indulgence, but it's not. He actually had composed a melody to the lyrics, which were challenging lyrics to start with, and then laid down, I was there, he laid down 18 tracks on top of it, one at a time, and then if the track didn't work, he'd have him back it out, and he'd go back out in the studio and lay another one down. So he understood the tone clusters he was building. He didn't write it out like a classical musician does, but it was thoroughly composed, and certainly doesn't really belong in the world of pop music at all, but the world of classical music.
Song to the Siren also appears on Star Sailor. However, it was to be a rather different version from the one recorded for the Monkees.
The version we heard on the Monkees show was, sort of prettier. It was more of a kind of madrigal folk rock song. And the version that we hear on Star Sailor, Tim sounds much more like tormented. It's actually, I think, closer to the original lyric of the song. He really does sound like this sailor who's crashed on the rocks, and it's got these kind of weird echoey effects around it. And the song is pretty much just Tim and his electric guitar, and it's definitely one of the most haunting things he ever did.
Long afloat on shipless oceans, I did all my best to smile.
And it sounds like he has more of a coherent idea of how to apply the most radical aspects of his voice to very radical material. And he also intersperses that with a couple of kind of nice, pretty songs. It's almost as like he's trying to say, you can never define who I am. I'm always going to be moving around. I'm always going to be a moving target. You'll never know what to expect from me, not just from album to album, but even within an album.
Despite Star Sailor's present status as an avant-garde classic, at the time, like its predecessor Lorca, it was a commercial failure.
The public at large, they couldn't hear it at all. They couldn't relate to it at all. And I think that it hurt him, certainly commercially, after that.
When Tim toured to support Star Sailor, the performances were every bit as challenging as the record itself.
He took the Star Sailor Band on the road starting in 1970, and between then and 71, it seemed like with each gig, he pushed the boundaries further and further, to the point where he wasn't even playing the songs on Star Sailor anymore. He was making animal noises, and he was encouraging the band to just completely wing it on stage. And any requests for his old songs on stage were greeted with just cutting comments from him. At one gig, somebody yelled out, "How about Buzzin' Fly?" And Tim's response was, "How about horse shit?" He had no interest in playing anything that anybody even remotely recognized.
Unfortunately, at the end of it, he had no audience. He was out. He'd spent 3.5 years developing the concept to its fullest. What was he going to do next?
Tim's popularity plummeted to the point where things became financially difficult. Much to his distress, he broke up the Star Sailor band and by the end of 1971 stopped performing altogether. Despite a few forays into the world of acting, it was clear that Tim's career was in serious trouble. So in 1972, 2 years after the release of one of the most esoteric records in modern music, Tim recorded and released Greetings from LA.
I'm afraid to address the change from Star Sailor to Greetings from LA. I'm as mystified as anyone else.
Greetings from LA was, without a doubt, the record that was meant to reestablish Tim on the pop charts in some way. They brought in Jerry Goldstein, who was the producer behind War, who were a really big band at the time. And the idea was to kind of get Tim back on a kind of rock and roll track. He was a little hesitant at first, but his money was drying up. He had a second wife now, Judy, and he adopted her son who had some medical issues. And so there were a lot of bills to be paid suddenly, and Tim knew that. And so he was open eventually to, you know, making a kind of more commercial rock record.
The result is strange in that it's not exactly the music of somebody selling out either, the Greetings from LA, because if it had been, it wouldn't have worked. I mean, Tim certainly got the vocal chops to do anything. You get the right pieces in there, the right songs, and a producer and a different band should be able to knock out a top 40 hit with Tim's abilities. But that didn't happen either. So what was happening? I don't even know. It sounds like music that's making fun of people who sell out, which is really demented. You know, a complete waste of time if that's what he was doing. But to me, that's what it sounds like.
It's almost uncomfortable for me to listen to because it just feels like he's being finally pigeonholed into something that wasn't of his own choosing. That's maybe something that he was a little bit embarrassed to do. He's pulling it off well in Greetings from LA, but for the last 2 studio albums that he was doing, he couldn't even really muster that conviction.
Despite the fact that Greetings from LA was another commercial failure, many now believe the album is an artistic success and believe that Tim Buckley was far from selling out.
I don't think he was a sellout at all. Where do you go to a new place? This was new. Now he moved into this final period with Greetings from LA, just a rot gut dance album. He was married to Judy Buckley by this time. Judy loved the rot gut rhythms, the sexy lyrics, right? The bass things. Buddy HELM's great drumming was right in there. This music cooked. It was also mainstream and commercial. This was a place, however, that Tim had not visited before, and he was reinventing himself once again. This was the 5th conceptual innovation for him.
In a way, Greetings from LA is as daring as, you know, in the previous records that Tim Buckley had made. You know, it's about the last thing that anybody would have expected from him. And there really is, you know, I think a lingering sense, certainly on the part of critics, you know, that any experiment is fine except one that is an attempt to garner you a larger audience. You know, that's the one thing that's just the ultimate crime.
Despite the commercial nature of the music, the lyrics, however, were far from radio-friendly.
Tim couldn't resist from adding his own twist, which was some pretty pornographic lyrics, or lyrics steeped in kind of this lusty sexuality, which people think might have been derived from his passion for Judy, his second wife. And there was, you know, whip me, beat me lyrics, literally. There were songs about sort of having affairs with married women and this sort of you know, steamy bordello side. Songs that were not in any way going to get on the radio. You know, musically, maybe they had a chance, but lyrically, it was doubtful that AM radio programmers at the time would want those lyrics and those songs to be on their airwaves.
Eat on top of me, woman. Eat on top, let me breathe. Eat on top of me, woman. Let me see what you learn tonight.
That Get on Top of Me was also a statement about sexuality. And at that time, that was unheard of, to be that articulate.
Greetings from L.A. should have been a hit. This thing really cooks. I don't know why they didn't market it the way it should have been marketed, but it should have been a hit. Many of the people I know today who like Tim Buckley regard that album as their favorite album, because it's got the cojones, it's got the sensuality, it's got the rich, raw emotion.
For the Greetings from LA tour, Tim recruited a new drummer by the name of Buddy HELM.
We played together, and it was just simpatico. Immediately, we understood each other. And he says, well, go on the road. And I said, fine. Give me your album so I can hear them. He says, no, I don't want you to hear any of my stuff. I just want you to play whatever you want to play. And I couldn't ask for a better gig than that. He was in the unique position of being a corporate artist. And because of that position, his son suffered the same dilemma, where the label and the management is making suggestions to the artist, and they'll hang a sort of Damocles over the artist's head, saying, if you don't do what we want you to do, stylistically, sing this song, we'll withdraw the project. You know. So the artists, especially in LA, they were always struggling under that pressure.